Welcome to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast featuring San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. All right, so it's Women's History Month, so we thought let's talk about women's law because history is important, right? Ward, when did the first law come out for women in the workplace?
Well,
That was kind of a
you know
mean
what? Hold
question without
on.
telling you.
I think it's the Fair Labor Standards Act,
Okay,
and I think it's passed in 1938, and there
so
were
it's
some
way back
protections in the original one for women.
because we had to get our voting first, right? And then
Yeah.
just saying, Ward.
Oh, you're so funny.
Here we
Yes.
go. We listen, everybody keeps carrying on about the Constitution and this and that. And I go, listen, we didn't have any say in that. Ooh,
Well, yeah, probably not, other than
no.
women talking to their husbands at night. I mean, yeah, and who knows what happened there, but yeah,
They
no
have a
direct.
knife in their hand. They're like, you will make it work this way. Yeah, behind every great man's a great
Abigail
woman.
Adams with her shotgun. All right, John.
Yeah, I know, right? Get on that horse. Go ride through the night. Paul Revere, no, anyway, don't start me. But yeah, no, no. I'm glad we're talking California law, employment law for women. And we're going to start off with federal, though, because, okay, so as we know, like everybody has to abide by the federal, but California always likes to have extra laws, right? It's one of those states that adds to it, right? So you have to abide by both somehow.
If you're in California, yeah.
Hmm.
So federal, of course, is national, and so it applies to
Hmm.
all the states.
Yeah.
But in employment, anyway, most of the federal law says, well, if the states want to protect their employees more, they're allowed to.
Okay, so if you are a California business based in California that started in California, your headquarters, and then you have a second office in Arizona, do you have to abide by California in the Arizona thing or no? I'm just going back to old conversations here
Yeah,
because
I know we've talked
something to
about this
think about.
before, and let me remind everyone, it depends where the employee is working. So if you have
Okay.
employees working in Arizona, Arizona law will cover them. Of course, federal law does too. So if Arizona law isn't that protective, at least they have the federal law. And of course, vice versa. If a California company has employees working in California, California law applies as well as the
Okay.
federal. But like I said, whatever's more friendly to the employee, at least in employment law, that applies. So that's where the feds say, hey, you can override us if you're going to be more friendly to the employees.
Okay. But you can't go less. Yeah.
Can't go less than what the
Less is not
feds.
more in this scenario. This is not. So
Well, it
yeah,
could be. What
well,
if, in Wyoming, they have no protections for anyone, and federal law says, well, you got to protect them at least as much as we say. So
yeah.
then less is more.
Okay. All right. No, okay,
Sort
you
of.
got
I mean,
kind of.
yeah.
Should we argue this? No, I'm just kidding. But okay, but I like this looking at the different states and everything because it is, when you go somewhere, it's like for us as our company, because we do business nationally and internationally. So that gets interesting, when it's tax time. So you know
Oh,
what we're
yeah.
doing right now,
Yeah, yeah,
going,
yeah. I don't
should
know
we have
tax.
expanded into
Don't
that
talk to me
state?
about tax, but yeah.
It's happening. It's
Yeah.
ew. I love
I have
spring,
someone else do that.
but still, man. All right, let's
No,
not talk.
yours are going to be complicated. Yep, I hear you.
No, it's all the different states, you know, and so you have to pay state tax on anyway. I don't want to talk about tax right
Yeah,
now.
let's don't get into that. Mm,
No, because
it's interesting though.
mm, mm.
Maybe we can
All
talk
right.
about it over a beer sometime.
Yeah, I think beer is always the way to go. Beer or wine, y'all. It's hump day afterwards, like today it's hump day. So you get
Oh,
to have a happy hour,
is it? No,
everybody.
today's Tuesday. What are you talking about?
We're recording on Tuesday, but it's airing on Wednesday, so it's hump
Oh,
day.
excuse
Yeah.
me. I
See?
so everybody
See?
knows that we recorded this a day early. Well,
Yeah, see? See?
you're
See?
welcome.
You're very honest. You're very
Mhm.
honest. So, everyone, we're going to start with the federal law and we're going to talk about pay, Equal Pay Act, the
Mhm.
EPA, not like, the one that Richard Nixon signed in. I don't think he signed the Equal Pay Act, did he? I don't know, but What this is really, that means like,
He wasn't president when this was passed. You know what? I wrote some notes that I probably ought to look at just to make sure. Yeah, Equal Pay Act was 1963, so he was not
oh,
president.
oh, yeah. So this was, um, no, you're right. You're right. So this was before him making sure.
68 was when he was
See,
elected.
whew, I just passed that by a hair, didn't I? Because I was almost going to say this was, I know that it, yeah, I know because of other laws and things like the EPA that he did sign in. So yeah, okay. I'm just checking my history. But the Equal Pay Act, so 1963, that's interesting because why are we still fighting for equal pay then?
Well, I think you could
Just
say the
saying.
act didn't wasn't that effective, maybe. And there's all those statistics you always hear where, well, women are paid, 70 cents on the dollar for every man. I don't know where they come up with those. I mean, there could be ways of playing with it. I'm not trying to talk it down or anything. I'm sure that the average woman probably does not make as much as the average man. I'm not sure it's 70 cents on the dollar, but
In general.
yeah. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I feel comfortable with that statement, put it that
I
way.
do too. Because it's true and it goes by state and everything. So the Equal Pay Act, what does that, I mean, what does that get us? I mean, so if we're still having that issue, is that where we need, so you say in your article, and everyone, the link to Ward's article is a really good list of these laws. And I don't even know, there's so many that he put on here and he's not even done with it because there's so many. So this, it's interesting. So he's got a list for federal and California, but you say the Equal Pay Act includes salary, overtime, bonuses, stock options, benefits, vacation and holiday pay, and profit sharing plans. But if we're not doing it federally, why isn't it working? Like seriously, why are we still,
That now that's a question that's maybe a little beyond the law, but let's just think about it. So,
if the law is there, shouldn't everybody be equal by now? Since the 60s.
well, all right. So there are questions within the laws. Maybe that's the easiest way to answer it. So what is performing substantially the same job mean?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So you have one person, they're COO, and then you have someone else who's the assistant COO, but are they really doing the same job and they just gave them a different title? So you really what the probably the biggest issue is you got to look and see what each one's doing and then compare them. And finding out what each one actually does, that can be a big job. I mean, there are like okay, here's a good example. Well, I hope the the public understands what I'm talking about. But if you're trying to figure out if someone is an exempt employee, where they can be paid a certain salary that qualifies and then also do the duties of that exemption, finding out whether they do the duties can be really difficult. There's so many gray areas in it. And I think you find the same thing here where, well, what's performing substantially the same job? And so you're going to really have to look at what they do every day.
You said duty.
Oh,
I just had to do that. Sorry, I'm kidding. That
okay.
was funny. Come on, it was funny. But no, I see what you mean. So it really is about rating how equal, like who from who. Okay, so one of the
So that's not an
easiest,
easy thing to prove necessarily, is
but
I guess my point.
yeah,
So that's
but
one problem. And then you've got the inter-office working, the politics of the office. Do you really want to make a wave? You're making, $2,000 less and you don't think it's fair, but you go, well, what if I make a big deal out of this? What's going to happen to me? And it's not usually, very often, it's not with that particular employer because maybe you're not really liking that particular employer and you wouldn't mind going away. But sometimes it is. Sometimes you go, I like my job. I'm not going to make a wave. Or you go, I don't want to be blackballed in the industry. And I
mm,
hear that kind of stuff fairly often.
mm.
So I think those are what I would call office political pressures that can overcome the effectiveness of these laws.
What about transparency though? Isn't there a thing about transparency now about that's kind of a shifting now? Like everybody should know who's getting what because I mean you see this, I think a lot of what people are going to identify with is you see this in Hollywood. The woman, the female lead is making less than the male lead, right? And that becomes a big deal. So Star Trek was one of them. Okay. And then they went, Leonard Nimoy and the other dude went in, and the one lady wasn't getting as much. And it was also discriminatory because of her race. And they just went in and said, yo, she ain't making as
I
much.
think was her name.
I'm going to say, I don't want to get it wrong.
Ooh, I think something like that. But
I
I
don't know.
remember I loved that show back in the day. I'm not a
It was
Trekkie,
Shatner's birthday yesterday, so I'm kind of in that mode.
and he's still
I,
alive, right?
yeah, he's incredible, man. And have you seen him sing? Like, have you listened to him sing?
Well, he didn't invite me to his birthday this year, so
Oh
no.
no, no, he can sing really. It's interesting. Let's put it that
Okay,
way. It's
good for
interesting.
him.
He did Silent Night with Iggy Pop.
Oh,
Anyway, but anyhow, no, this is we're
all right,
detouring.
we're
I'm
off on
getting
the
us back.
Lavuru
Okay, so but anyway, so in
weeds.
Hollywood, people see this a lot more because it's, makes headlines and then it is used. It
Yeah,
happens in the music industry. It does happen. Um, so it gets into the papers. But if, at the real estate office, or not, maybe not real estate, it's not a good example as much, but you know, a manufacturing company, it may be a little different, in managerial
definitely
positions.
different, and it's not
Yeah.
gonna shake the headlines like a movie star would or a pop singer would. And so there's that going against you, I guess.
Mm.
But the other thing is, even in those cases, I think if you really wanted to put up a defense, you could say, well, look, the man had, it could be man, woman. Actually, these laws protect men too if they're underpaid, and there are situations where men are in female dominated industries and
Oh,
aren't paid as much. Whatever. So it can protect a man too, but um, if if you wanted to make a defense based on the differences in the male role and the female role, you might be able to. You'd have to look at it and say, well, how many lines did he have? How many lines did she have? And you could just go down the line and say, well, look, we're paying this man or
yeah.
woman this much more because they're speaking more,
Mm.
or whatever other criteria you
It
may.
happened in Grey's Anatomy. That's a newish kind of thing where she, um, now I forgot her name, but the one
I know who you're talking about, and I forgot her name too.
we
But
we
yes,
suck at Hollywood history.
I am horrible at Hollywood. My kids make fun of me. I go,
I've got friends for this. But anyway, the leading lady who it's named after, right? The show is named after it. She goes around. She was in it for
we'll
20,
call
and
her
she wasn't
Gray. How
making
about
as
that?
great. Addison was her name because of Addison the doctor. I'm gonna get in trouble.
Oh
This
no.
is going anyway. She wasn't getting as much yet. She was doing all the promo, and the series is named after her character. So Addison Gray. There we go. We did it.
Nice.
I
Nice.
wouldn't have
Love it.
remembered the gray if you hadn't brought it up, even though it's Gray's Anatomy. I wouldn't have remembered it. But so she was new-ish compared to the other guy who had done some bombing and on his own, like other TV movies and stuff that didn't do as well, but because he was male and had some success, he got a bigger paycheck. And then she had to go knock, knock, knock. I've been here for so many years, and this is the main character. So I want more. And they gave it to her.
I think in those cases, Hollywood doesn't really want to offend a big part of the population. So they,
Oh,
rather than put
yeah.
up the defense that I said maybe they couldn't, and again, who knows? It have to
Yeah.
on a case by case basis. Um, they probably don't even want to because they don't want to turn
Okay.
people off.
Yeah. Now, California Pay Act. Let's do the California Fair Pay Act
Yeah,
since we're in
and I
the,
think that's
this
why you
is, yeah,
talked about what do you call it? Keeping it up front, keeping it out in the open.
transparency.
Transparency, good word. I love it.
Yeah.
And
Mm,
that is more apparent in the California law than it is in the
mm,
federal law, where it encourages people or allows people to talk about what their pay is amongst each other. Now, the federal law, there's a different federal law that does allow that. You're allowed to talk about workplace conditions, and your pay and other things like that too. So there are federal laws that protect that, but not right in the law like California law does,
mm.
not in the Fair Pay Act law.
Okay. So the transparency thing, like, what about nonprofits? Like, Honestly, I don't go around telling anybody about my personal finances. To me, that's just, my what I make is what I make and it's my business. So, like, it's mine. I'm not one of those who are going to go to the cooler and start telling people, I made this more of that. Now in sales, we all, competing, which is what they want you to do. Like, I made the sale, you didn't, and that like pushes everybody to make more sales. So it's competitive. It's a good thing. But so some people are just not going to talk about it, which I think there's like unless there's a bunch of women get together and they all start finding out that they aren't getting as much as the men, then that can be a big doo-doo, right? So the transparency can be there, but does the company have to say, like, this is how much in general? Like when they put it out there that they're hiring, that this is how much is being made. So everyone looks at it. Like a nonprofit might have to do it a little bit more, right? Because don't they have to publish their records, their financial records? And
I don't know specifically about nonprofits. I know they have to publish things that other companies don't, and I'm not
mhm.
sure exactly what documents those are, but that's
This is
my
why you do not become a nonprofit. No, just kidding.
um
I'm kidding.
yeah. But there I'm sorry, I lost the train of your
Yeah,
question. Could
no,
you
it's going
ask it again?
into the actually posting like on
Oh, yes,
LinkedIn,
yes,
hey,
yes,
we've
yes,
got
yes.
this kind of job, and like people are using all those online things, like how much,
Yes.
so your staff may see that.
So there is a law in California that requires you to post the salary that you're going to offer. And when you're giving when you're giving raises, you can't consider past raises as a basis necessarily. Necessarily, because what if a woman has been making less for the same job for a long time? Then you can't go, well, you made 32, even though the guy is making 40 for the same position. So we'll give you 35. So you're not allowed to consider that depressed amount of money when you give raises either. It's supposed to be at least somewhere in the middle, the average of the pay you give for that job. And then,
Mm.
but you can give different amounts of money for the same job depending on experience, education, seniority, and other things.
And some,
But
so
those are
they can say,
non-sex related.
now what happens, because sometimes, salaries are negotiable. So what if a woman goes in there or a guy and says, hey, I see this is what you want to pay me. Maybe it's 75, right? I want 75. That's great. But I bring this other expertise where I can see how you can expand your company. So I want 95 because I'm worth that. And they look at everything, the way they're talking, he or she, and they're like, dang, yeah, it's worth the extra 20, right? Um, so they have to be pretty good to get that. But so does that get published if someone negotiated above,
Does it get
like
published?
posted,
Oh
like,
well, yeah. There now it depends on the size of the company. I think I know what you're getting at. Then there are reporting requirements in California that requires you to keep statistics on who's making, and it's across the board. It's not just gender based, it's also race based, except and everything
okay.
else. And so you're supposed to keep statistics for each group and be able to show that when and it's usually used when I see it is not so much in pay as much it is in terminations. Um, but the same information can be used.
Okay, wow. Whew. Now, so California, what are the California laws for women that people should know regarding pay, the Fair Pay Act for California? So women know, are they protected more than the federal government? Because the federal, it doesn't seem like it's
Yeah,
working.
there is more protection in the California Fair Pay Act. And a little bit of an aside, the California Fair Pay Act has been expanded to include groups based on race and potentially other types of groups. So there has to be fair pay amongst everyone. And so I just wanted to say that it's expanded beyond what the feds do. The Fed's it's just a gender gap thing. It's
Hmm.
not a race-based thing. So
Okay.
anyway, um, there is more protection generally because, and like we talked about earlier, was one extra protection of the California Fair Pay Act is, hey, they encourage you. They say an employer can't stop you from sharing your information about what you make.
Mm,
And like I said, I'm not sure how mm, absolutely important that is because there are other federal laws that do allow that type of discussion anyway, but it's just not in the federal Fair Pay Act.
mm,
And then there are some slight differences, like it's California used the term substantially similar work.
okay.
And so it doesn't have to be, the exact, there's a little more breadth than that. So if employee X is doing, I don't know, um, is doing accounting, and employee Y is not an accountant but is a bookkeeper. But if their jobs, if what they're doing is really pretty similar, even though one's an accountant, one is not. Now, all right, I'm getting a little crazy on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, but that you've got like one may have the degree, the other doesn't, but they're
Yeah, and
still
so the
doing it.
degree could allow you to give someone more money
Hmm.
just because they have the degree and not. Um, and experience is the same thing. That could too. But if they're really doing the same job, I'm not sure why you'd pay someone more than the other just because of the degree. And if it's substantially similar work, then you could certainly argue, well, they're really doing the same thing, so they should make the same.
Okay.
Um, and the employer could come back and say, well, this person's got a college education in accounting, so that's why we're doing it. And they'd probably win that, but that doesn't mean it's quite right. And I could see it going the other way too. If they go, well, we sit next to each other, we ask each other the same question, we
We
work
steal each
together, we
other's
ask each,
homework.
and then is the education really a factor there, or is it just that one's a man
Yeah.
and one's a woman? So you could get into some interesting, I
Mm,
think, cases if that ever arose like that. But anyway, that's an example of a
okay.
situation where it might be substantially similar work.
Okay. So now we get into what is this Title VII of the Civil Rights Act? Ooh.
Oh yeah,
Okay. Okay. Oh, discrimination. Here we go. Sexual
yeah.
harassment.
It's the big one, and I would say the counterpart in California is the Fair Employment and Housing Act, and that protects many of the same things. But clearly,
Okay.
the California Fair Employment Housing Act is more protective. But
Okay.
they're pretty similar at least in what they're designed to do.
Mm, okay. So this is like where human resources really needs to make sure those booklets go out and have some consistency of communication about what to do and not do at work when
Yeah,
it
and
comes
what we're
to.
really talking about is, sexual harassment and sexual discrimination because this is the women's
Hmm.
uh, um, podcast we're doing. So, but Title VII does protect other types of discrimination, harassment.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, and this is in the article, women weren't originally included in the 1964 Title VII Civil Rights Act. They were later added in 1967. And of course, the California law always had included gender, race, and sex. So
Okay. So the
it from
first
the
law was
beginning protected
for,
those
was it for more
groups.
race discrimination? The first
Well,
one?
yeah, that would have been probably the major one that they were trying
Okay.
to take care of during that period of
Mm.
time. Yeah.
I find this all fascinating because the other part of it is like when you look at income and the whole part where you're saying how close are they doing on in work, like you see women doing the typical male jobs that have been like this is a guy's thing, like being a mechanic or things like that. I mean, we were just talking about this on a show today. That is also airing on Wednesday when we recorded on Tuesday about women in the world of travel writing. It used to be a very male dominated industry. Women were at home, guys got to travel around, and we all know what was going on in the back. Just kidding. But I'm just saying, oh, see, smack. You're not allowed to be like that. Not allowed to say those things. Naughty, naughty. Smack those knuckles, Lisa. But no, I'm just kidding. But um there were, it's stereotypes, right? And then you can see a woman go in, maybe be an excellent car mechanic, maybe work on airplanes, whatever, and they should have the same pay as a guy mechanic that's doing just as good a job, or both. But there's that immediate discrimination. I mean, even the militaries had to move over for some really kick-ass women that are serving and have been serving. There's women in military for like a long time now, almost 100 years, I'd say.
The pay, I don't
Well, more than
think
that, actually.
would have
Yeah.
been discriminatory in the military because it just depends on your rank. But I
Yeah.
guess you could argue, well, maybe the woman's not making rank as fast. I mean, again, you'd have to look at the specific set of
Yeah.
facts of,
But
of
like
each
on the mechanic, I
situation.
mean, that's federal stuff, but like on the, um, in a job, like if it's a mechanic, say, and it's a huge company or whatever, that a woman can sit there and pull the same amount just as good, right? It shouldn't be only men are
No, you
mechanics,
should be paid for the work you do, not for who you are,
right?
right?
So isn't this all getting close to the DEI thing from last time that we talked? Is it kind of like,
Oh,
oh, the
that
gray
popped
or
into my mind,
mm,
and it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I think it
mm-hmm.
is. I think it's touching on it.
we're like the DEI thing is like, ooh, ooh, oh boy, it's gonna be an interesting year. Really, it's gonna be an
Well,
interesting year.
interesting enough, I just read something that a female lawyer out of New York wrote, and I kind of follow her, and I think she's
Hmm.
really good. She mostly works, well, it looks to me like she mostly talks about federal law, and that may be because of the laws are different in New York. And so I'm always going, well, in California, it'd be a little different because of the laws we
Hmm.
have out here. But she said, hey, don't scrap all your DEI yet. But she did say, well, there is a point to what the Trump administration's doing. And she didn't come out and use those words, but she certainly indicated it. And that was, well, if you're picking certain people, like a woman of color, over a man just because they're a woman of color,
That's not
then
good.
you've got a problem. And so
Hmm.
she and I wasn't sure which way she'd go on that, but I read the whole article and I usually don't. And that's where she ended up. And I thought, well, yeah, and that's fair because you don't want to pick anyone
No,
because
I
of
just said
what
that
they
on
look like.
our women's podcast, same day. Everybody listened like just a few hours before this airs on bigblendradio.com. We did a women's making history, and we were talking about a lot of politicians, especially Texas, had a lot of women in political power, over the years. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very
Don't they
interesting.
talk about a shotgun, man? Here we go. you know, so but it's incredible. I mean, even look at Sandra Day O'Connor and people like that in history, So the reality is, and we were talking about, female president, and wouldn't be great at some point, but of course, I open my mouth and go, yes, I would love that, but I don't want a token. And then I was like, am I allowed to say that? Is that no words now? I don't know what is politically correct, but I don't want a token woman just because she's a woman. I want one that is qualified. And I mean that in anything, because I want it to be positive. I want it to rock, and it's this, you see what I mean? And I'm all pro women, everybody getting everything that they deserve, but and of different race, gender, all of that stuff, but it should be someone qualified, because if they're, all eyes are on them if they are, right? And then if they even make one mistake, then it's like, then it's becomes this horrible, nasty thing that happens after that. You know what I mean? Like you almost have to be if you're a token person, you've got to be perfect almost, because the other side's waiting for you to
I think
fall.
my mom went through that a little bit because she was
Yeah.
pretty successful. She worked for some big companies. She built in-house medical programs for, I
Oh.
know she did at Marriott, for instance.
Oh.
Um, and I think there were times, and she's passed away, but I think there were
Mhm.
times when she really felt like there was an old boys network, and I know she did. She talked about it, and that's unfortunate too. So there's two sides. I mean, it's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So you got the idea behind DEI is you want to be fair to everyone, and you don't want to pick um, token people to fill a slot.
See, am I in
You
trouble
don't
for
want
saying
that.
token? Saying token. I don't mean it,
Well,
r-
you used the term, so I'm using it
but
because
I don't
I
mean it
think
horrible,
no,
because I
I don't
want
think you mean it
I
in a
want
bad way,
people, I
but
want everyone to have equal rights, 100% across the board.
but the
And if
best
you're
person
good,
for the
good.
job, or if there's a bunch of equal candidates, don't pick them because of some physical characteristic.
Ah,
It just doesn't make sense.
but what people are upset about is that they're not being picked, even if they have the qualifications. So the same thing I said, like at the beginning of the conversation, is if there's an equal pay act for women, why are we not across the board in general getting equal pay in this country? And why do we have to have states have to come up and saying, well, it's not working federally, but we better do it for our people? Like, so it's not working. So I think that's where the thing of DEI is that people don't feel like the laws are being pushed to work. And maybe when it comes to things like DEI and discrimination and harassment, like what you were saying, is like, do I want to rock the apple cart? Will I get fired?
I think
You
that's
know,
part of it.
I really do. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's such a that's what I think is the biggest problem. It's like, okay, and then a state has to go in and say, all right, man, government federally is not doing what it needs to, and California is one of those states, and New York, Washington, let's go in and do more. Florida, good luck. Go hang out with the gators and see how you do. I'm just kidding, but I like Florida. You know what I mean,
No,
politically
no,
and
Florida's
whatever.
great. I'm glad
you
I live in
know
California, but Florida's great.
yeah, no, but I think it's if it's and it's so hard, because at the end of the day, where it's all generalizing, and each state is different of their makeup of people too. It shouldn't,
Yep,
you know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah.
And so,
So what we're
yes,
really talking about is fairness, and
yes,
it'd be great if we didn't have to have any laws and we had written on our hearts,
no,
be
but
fair,
yeah, I know, but
and
then
we followed it, right?
Ward wouldn't have a career, so we want to keep
Well, I'd
Ward
do
in this.
something else.
Nah, well, he's traveling, but but okay, so we did the civil rights part, and so these laws get pushed and get bigger as needed, right? And then some people will get up and speak, and that's what America is about, being able to speak,
Yep,
even if
I
it's
agree with
hard.
you on that. I do agree with
There's
you.
a lot of people who take chances. There's whistleblowers. God bless the whistleblowers in life, man. I just I think they're fantastic. They
Well,
risk
especially
so
when they
much.
uncover something that's just like that
What?
was horrendous. I mean, it's just like,
Yes,
oh my
don't
gosh,
start me. Don't
yeah.
start. Don't. Yeah, we won't go there, but I could. But I'll behave. Let's go back to women. Let's talk about women. See, this is the other thing that kind of, when we look at women being moms, right? So that is a hard part. Like women in the workplace, you get those comments about the monthly cycle. You get the comments of they're a mom, they need to stay home, or you can't trust a woman really to go for it all the way through because if she falls pregnant and all that kind of stuff. So the women's body and what the woman can produce, which is amazing, right? A woman
All
can
right.
produce a child, right? But in the workplace over the years, it's been an upward battle, which I think, depending on where you are, corporate companies are starting to realize, like, help with childcare. I mean, there's so many companies where a woman, by the time she gets childcare, there's no point in even going to work financially, between gas and all of it, depending on your career, right? If you're not getting paid enough,
Yeah,
so
no, I
so
mean,
the
all right.
money and the we need to take care of our women. So how are we taking care of our women in the workplace, Ward, federally and in
Yeah,
California?
well, we have pregnancy discrimination laws,
Oh,
and so if a woman is being discriminated against because she's pregnant or has had a child or has some other medical condition related to the pregnancy, then that would be discrimination, and that would be actionable, and they could sue their employer if there's discrimination based on that. Um,
what happens if you get fired for falling pregnant? because you're not able to be there the whole time, like at a certain point, and then you need a couple of weeks, with your kid, give birth and that kind of stuff. And then someone goes, no, I need somebody else, so I'm firing you because you're pregnant. Is that what happens?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That would be no
I
no.
feel like we
And
should have like 20 women here asking you all these questions because I've never given birth, but
yeah,
God bless
no.
you all for doing it, you know?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And kids are amazing. And you're right, it's a miracle. The whole thing is just fantastic. But
Mm,
yes, if an employer were to terminate someone for becoming pregnant, then that would be discrimination, wrongful termination, just so many
okay.
different things. It would be wow. Of course, and this is where the gray area is.
Mm,
Usually, employers won't come out and say it, and they'll try to do it in a different way. I mean, if they're really going to try to do this, and so maybe the case isn't as clear as you would like it to be. But certainly, if it's as clear as you stated it, yeah, that was just the
that's
the
rude.
the employer's going to get swapped. They're going to have a big
Okay.
hard time.
Don't do it. Okay. So that's a no-no. And what about discrimination in the workplace? If people are, be careful about
Okay, well,
ladies'
that's what we're talking
weights
about
too.
because I'm an
Don't,
employment attorney, so this is
yeah,
all workplace stuff.
yeah.
Okay.
At work, watch what you say to a woman and her weight. Don't go congratulations because it might not be
Oh,
a
yeah, well,
congratulation.
that's
Be careful. But
see, that wouldn't
just
be discrimination if you said, "Well, when are you expect or when are you gonna when are you
ooh,
expecting?" And the woman's gained
ooh.
some weight and it's not now that wouldn't be discrimination though.
Yeah, I know it's not because if they meant well, you
Right.
know. But dude, you're so in the doghouse if you
It
do
shouldn't
that.
would be pregnancy discrimination because they're not pregnant.
Okay, but what about okay, what happens if a woman has difficulty with childbirth, illness comes, maybe even loses the baby because that could you need time out. So is there time out kind of things for women with all of this?
Or I don't know if there's one at the federal level. There certainly is one at the
Mm,
California level, where women are allowed to take time off to for um, pregnancy, miscarriages, even if they were trying to adopt a child and it didn't go through, you could take time off for that and other related things.
okay. Okay. And then what about with childcare? Is there anything to help women like, if they have to drive across town to take their kid to have childcare or whatever, do they have any grace in that and time out to take care of your kid if you know
Well,
what I mean?
yeah, there are again things in California that touch on that at least, and the pregnancy disability leave law that what we call PDL in California um, does to some degree cover parental care or prenatal care. I'm sorry, prenatal
Mm,
care. So there could be situations where you have to take time off, et cetera, for that. Um, Things related to childbirth directly you could get time off for, and then there are other laws though, both at the federal and the state level that
mm.
do allow for women to get time off to bond with their baby, um,
Cool.
bond with the adoption, an adopted child, and things like
Mm,
that. And those everyone's heard of these. I think FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and the
mhm.
CFRA, which probably not everyone's heard about, but it's the California equivalent of the FMLA. And again, it's more protective. You only
Okay.
need 5 employees before that law applies to you. There are other requirements as well, so it doesn't apply to everyone all the time.
Mhm,
But the California Family Rights Act does some heavy lifting when it comes to bonding.
mm,
And just to contrast that to the Family Medical Leave Act, the FMLA, the federal
mhm.
one, uh, that requires that the employer have 50 or more employees. So it doesn't kick in for everyone, nearly as many people as the California Family Rights Act would. That's a better way to put it.
Okay, so now what's the breastfeeding act about?
The Breastfeeding Act. Well, guess what? You're allowed to do it. Well,
It's
it's
a
really
law.
about
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
well, good.
it really mostly addresses expressing milk at work, but
Yeah, needing
because
to
it's
do
kind
it.
of tough to bring your child into work. Now, some workplaces may allow it, depending on what the kind of job it is, but normally you're probably talking about some type of daycare. Um, and so the real problem for most women would be, well, how do I pump my
Yeah,
milk? And
yeah,
so both the federal and state laws address that and allow women to do that in a relatively private place, and take time out to do it. So there is protection for doing that.
very cool. Very cool. So there's some great laws here to support women. And so we've touched on harassment, sexual harassment is bad. Um, but I want to go back to, just let me go back again because we were talking about, pregnancy. There's a medical leave, family and medical leave. That's federal, right?
Yeah, the
Um,
FMLA. Yeah.
okay. And then the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Um, that's kind of goes with what you were just saying, right? For the breastfeeding and being able to,
It's the federal law that applies, that allows female employee, well,
yeah, to do
supposedly a
the,
male, but probably a female employee who wants to express milk.
okay. So now, hey, we're doing pretty good at this. We haven't got to the tax cuts yet, but, um, and
Which I think is really interesting. And guess who
okay, go
signed
ahead.
that?
Go.
Guess who signed that one?
Who?
Trump.
He did? What's the tax cuts? Oh, he did a tax cut. Shocking.
Yeah. Well, he did tax cut, but he said, "Hey, look." Well, of course, Congress passed it too, so it's not just Trump, but he signed it. Um, if there is a sexual harassment or discrimination claim and the case has been settled, if you want a non-disclosure agreement in there, and that was really common. Now in California, you can't do it anymore. California
Okay.
says you can't even have non-disclosure. This they're allowed to talk about this. It's all out in the
Mm,
open. But I don't think the federal has gotten that far yet. In fact, I'm sure they haven't. But instead of doing that, they've said, well, if you do have a non-disclosure agreement, then
mm.
we're not going to give you a tax write-off for it because they used to be able to write off the money that they spent on the defense of the case and the settlement of the case.
Ooh,
So it's kind of interesting.
yeah. I'm gonna have to mull that over. That's a thinking one. Like that'll take me time. Yeah. Okay, so what's the Lily Ledbetter one about? I just want to
Now
say
that
Lily
changed the
Ledbetter.
Equal Pay Act.
Okay.
What was happening with the Equal Pay Act is the when the first check that was cut to the woman that was did not follow the Equal Pay Act,
Okay.
so a man was getting paid more,
Yeah.
um, then you had 2 years to file your case. But after that 2 year period, then you were not allowed to file the case. That
Oh,
means it was the statute of
yeah, I was
limitations.
gonna say that, yeah.
Even if it was happening time and time again, every paycheck.
Mm,
So Lily Ledbetter said, well, that doesn't seem fair. What if it continues to happen?
yeah.
And so now you're allowed to file within excuse me, within 2 years um, of any check that doesn't
Oh, so it could,
follow
yeah.
the law of
So
the
if you
Equal
just got
Pay
it
Act.
today, you could wait 2 years. Yeah. Even if you've
Yes,
been there for 10 years having the same thing. Okay.
right,
Oh,
right.
okay.
And so again, and if you wait 2 more years and it's still happening, it's the last paycheck. So you
Okay.
don't get cut off so easily. And the way
Mm,
it was written before, bad paycheck, a series of bad paycheck afterwards. 2 years go by. Then you say, hey, I want to file. I think my last paycheck was bad. Well, you're right, but the first paycheck was too. And so you can't sue.
now you can.
So that's been fixed.
Okay, well, that's cool.
And
That's
that's
cool
the
because,
federal level.
and I think that's also that, are you scared to say something, you know?
Well, it could
And,
be. You're right.
you
Absolutely, you're
know,
right.
it's kind of like, do you say something? Everyone's in a different circumstance. And I think that's, where some of these laws step up and go, okay, and then you hope to hell it's going to actually work, if you open your mouth. Let's go to domestic violence, sexual harassment prevention training, we've talked about that before, but that is something that has to really be a main deal in a company, right? Especially California, not because of California, but in California, you have laws for that, versus the federal program, right?
As far as I know, there's no federal law that touches on that. But if you're in California and you are a survivor of domestic violence, it can be other things now. It's expanded a little bit, but then you do get some uh, time off. You can use your sick leave for that. You can use vacation time for it, or you can just get
Okay.
it if you don't have any sick leave or vacation left over. You just
Mhm.
get it as unpaid leave.
Mhm.
Um, so and yeah, that's a good thing. So you can go to court, file restraining order
Wow.
and things like that.
Okay. So, yeah, the whole thing about, domestic violence and all of that. And is there protection at work for a lady working? Like, I think I told you back in the day when, it was to be in the music industry, you'd be walking to your car by yourself at night, and that may not be the best thing at 10 at night, in a parking lot. So what about protection for women in the
Yeah.
workplace? I mean,
Well,
and even if they have a crazy boyfriend or a crazy whatever, crazy girlfriend, who knows? Like what happens if they got a
yeah.
stalker? I mean, that's that and that can happen to men too. I know men that have gone through a lot of weird stuff. Makes for a
Yeah,
good
and
book.
so you can get what we call workplace accommodations, which is very similar to what we see in disability law.
Mm.
That's under the Fair Employment and Housing Act that we touched on earlier.
Okay.
So if you have a disability, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation. Same kind of thing here, where you can ask for, and actually, I think the term is reasonable in this. You can ask for a reasonable accommodation
Mhm.
um, to at work for help with someone who may be stalking you.
Mhm.
It's not a good character, obviously, and you need
Mm.
some protection. And so, yes.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, my youngest daughter is now working at a place where she closes,
Mm.
and she's the only one there. So I'm a
Ooh.
little concerned about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a well-lit area, et cetera, et cetera, but it's 10 o'clock at night. And
If
so,
there's money in hands, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, that the the evening thing has to, and then do you say anything because you need your job? That's that same thing I think that women have put up with for years. It's like you just go for it and do hope, what if you're working in a bar and there's a drunk guy, you
it's a
know?
common one where, yeah, you're closing. Now, usually at bars you see more than one person closing, but if it's a small
Yeah.
bar, not necessarily.
Mm.
And if you have a drunk customer who's getting a little too frisky, that can be a problem. So yeah, I agree. I hear you on that.
Yeah, no, the security thing is a big deal. And I was, kidding around about men about, oh, that makes a good book, but it does. But men do get harassed. They do get stalked and weird things have happened. And I know it's minimal compared to what women go through, but um there's some weird stalkers out there. Like people who do that stuff are creepy, man. They're creepy.
Yeah, it doesn't
And
make
it
any
can and
sense.
it can hurt your job. So that's what I was wondering about. If you are being stalked, can that and the person stalking you, as a woman, since it's what we're talking about today, um, and you're getting stalked by somebody who, you try to do a restraining order and then they do weird things and call your work and start disrupting your job, can you get fired because of that?
Well, no, you can't. I'm just trying to get fired because someone's stalking you. Holy
Yeah, because
smokes.
it's creating a distraction at work. Maybe they
Yeah, I
can
guess.
can you create, well, if they go beyond that's what a restraining order helps with, right?
Yeah, and you
Is
can get a workplace restraining order.
okay.
So
Okay, that's cool to know.
yeah. Um,
Get off my
and I'm
job,
just
man.
trying to think if it's a woman who's being stalked and she got fired, would that be violating the protections given under
Hmm.
Domestic Violence Employment Act? Um, no, yeah, I think it is because they're not allowed to discriminate because the employer's not allowed to discriminate because
They're a
of
victim of circumstance. Yeah.
yeah, the domestic violence or sexual assault or
Yes.
anything else. Now, of course, if it's not to that level, I mean, they might say, no, no, well, hold on. No, the law was expanded to stalking in California, so I think you can't discriminate even if someone's being stalked. Now, of course, here's where the problem might come in. Um, well, what is stalking? You know, it was what if you got this guy who kind of likes you and he sends you some emails every once in a while and he might walk into your store and buy something and then say hi. You know, at some point, maybe it's not stalking, so I guess I could see a case there potentially, but you know,
I mean, stalking is where some guy just like sits and stares at the front of the store.
well, yeah, if you're getting that,
There's some
yes.
freaky people. I mean, there's stalking, there's somebody likes you versus stalking. There's two different things, you know.
Well, I'm not so sure that's true with everyone. You know, we all have different levels of comfort, and some
Well, some
people's
people
level of
like
comfort.
stalkers, maybe. You know, it's like, I don't know. I got a stalker,
Oh, you
man. You
made me
don't.
laugh about a bad joke. I can't believe it. Uh,
I know, but
that
I'm
some
gonna get in
people
trouble.
like
It's
stalkers. Well,
politically
stalkers like stalkers.
yeah, but that's so weird. It's like, yeah. But if people, yeah, because there's stalkers and then there's stalkers that really want to kill you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and,
So,
and there's two different. Well,
yeah, yeah.
where does it become stalking is all I'm saying. And I
Okay,
think
you
there's
break
some
up with your
behavior that's
boyfriend and
probably really not, but it might be annoying, and there's some behavior that clearly
there's you
is.
break up with some guy and he doesn't, he calls your office every single day and
Well,
comes by there.
that's weird. That's getting
Yeah,
weird.
but they're out there.
Well, don't say, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It
I'm
exists.
just ladies, put your keys between your fingers and walk with a fist. That's what I was taught. Self-defense.
I
Good
say
thing
get a
to do.
Glock 9,
No,
concealed carry.
no, no, no.
No?
One little bit of road rage and that's it.
Or Glock 19, excuse me,
I
Glock
don't know.
9. What was I thinking?
I don't know. I don't
Glock
know.
19 is the real small one.
I don't know. I have no
Yeah.
clue. No, no. I did learn how to shoot one day we did that. And I did a rifle and a shotgun and holy cow, my arm hurt later, man. I was like, what, shoulder? Like, what the heck, man? It's
Yeah,
harder than
shotguns
you
kick a
think.
little bit.
Yeah, and it was loud, but
But,
yeah, it's
because I'm over 200 pounds, it doesn't hurt me. It usually doesn't hurt me at all. But if you're slighter, it could hurt.
yeah, I
And
didn't know what I
the
was
other
doing.
thing is, I have taught all my daughters to shoot. Now, not
Mhm.
handgun, but at least small rifles, 22s.
Yeah.
I think you really ought to be familiar with it,
You
honestly.
should know how to do something because, I think it's a good, because you never know if you're in a situation with someone attacking you and they have a gun. And if you're going to grab that gun, you better know how to use it. And you
Oof.
better grab that gun. Can't do half,
I
no
would be too
hesitation.
scared to grab a
And
gun.
now, if you're going to get it, like if they dropped it, I'd grab that gun
Oh, well,
if
if
I
they
could.
drop it,
But
they
you
have
better
greasy
not
hands.
don't be a baby
Oh
about
my
it. Like
God.
you know how they always have women tripping in the woods with their high heel shoes in movies? Drives
Oh,
me
the horror
bonkers.
movies. Oh, that
Yeah,
is
it's like, oh, we're always so stupid. Like, oh, I think we're getting better. Like some women will kill you, and eat your feet, as we say in South Africa.
interesting.
You know what
That
well, I don't know if
that's
it's
an
South
ugly
Africa.
visual.
You know what the eating of the feet means is you take it because you can't walk to heaven because your feet have been eaten off. That's the sentiment behind it.
Oh, interesting.
It's a tribal thing from back
Yeah,
in the day. I don't know, man. But anyway, that's a really good way to close a conversation on women employment.
I'm dumbfounded.
I know that. Listen, that's all you say to someone. If they're going to attack you, I'll eat your feet. I will kill you and I will eat your feet. No going to heaven for you. And it freaks them out. So it saved me in a couple barroom scenes from years and years and years and years and years ago. You know, Anyway, I better edit this,
Thumbs
huh?
out.
No, nah, nah. We keep
Yeah.
it real. Keep it real. Ward, always good stuff. Everyone, again, the article is linked in the episode notes, and I really encourage you to check it out because it's well written. It gets to the point. It's understandable as always, and really it gives you the details. I know we've talked a lot and gone back and forth on things as we always do, but take a good look at that article. It's a good thing to have, whether you're an employer or an employee. I think it's important that employers
Yeah,
remember this,
absolutely.
you know, especially get that training manual, the sexual harassment, discrimination.
You
Yeah.
Get
Keep
your
that
employee handbook and put all that stuff in there. And
and
remember
keep
to
it.
train your employees and train your supervisors every 2 years, sexual harassment.
But you can't wait every 2 years. People
Well, you
forget
can do it
everything.
more if you want, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Who remembers everything after 2 years? Do we remember after a month? Well, you shouldn't do harassment at all. How about that? Just like,
that's
don't
what I'm
do it.
saying. Write it on your heart and follow it. No,
Well, isn't
I
that
do not
sweet?
harass.
Yeah, right. There it is. Don't. Just don't.
Right.
Everyone, bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com is the website for Ward. Keep up with him there. He's here every fourth Wednesday, and we've been doing it for years and having so much fun. And there's always more laws,
It
more
never
coming.
stops.
It never stops. All right. Thanks, Ward.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast with San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Keep up with Ward at bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com or follow him on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also subscribe to Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.